The GS77 Stealth is MSI's latest evolution in lightweight, stealthy gaming laptops. It's also their boldest attempts to fit just about everything into a small chassis. But at what cost does this come to your wallet, and also its performance? Let's find out. Hi guys, and welcome back to the Epic PC channel, and today we're sitting down with the GS77 Stealth from MSI. It is one of the thinnest 17-inch gaming laptops on the market and the successor to the issue-laden GS75. That being said, even though it is a stealthy, thin-designed laptop, it does have an impressive list of specifications. It includes a NVIDIA RTX 3080 Ti at 105-watt TDP. That's quite a low TDP for a 3080 Ti, so it will be interesting to see this perform. It also has an Intel i9-12900H, 64 gigs of DDR4 4800 RAM, a 2TB NVMe SSD, and of course the 17.3-inch UHD 120Hz screen. Now, I did mention earlier that this was a successor of the issue-laden GS75, but that wasn't the only issue-laden GS series laptops that MSI has released. The 73, 72, and even 70 had issues with the design and the quality of the build that mostly stemmed from the laptop hinges. Now, MSI has listened to feedback from the market and completely redesigned their hinges, and I can safely say that the build quality on this is much better than their previous iterations. The hinges will last you a lot longer and probably serve you for a lifetime. The previous generations, I probably wouldn't even open and shut them too regularly. The build quality on the GS77 is obviously pretty outstanding. It uses premium material from head to toe, including zinc alloy, and although the zinc alloy is pretty thin at some sections, I wouldn't be calling it fragile by any stretch of the imagination, and looks like it can take a sturdy hit without being damaged. This is mainly the reason why the laptop comes in at only 2.45 kilograms, including the battery, and this is in line with some of the previous models such as the GS75 and GS72. It's in fact a couple hundred grams heavier than those two models. It also is quite thin, coming in at 2 centimeters thick, and when we compare this to something like the MacBook Air, that thing comes in at 1.6 centimeters. So it is a very thin, lightweight gaming laptop. An absolute standout feature of the GS77 is obviously the screen. It's a culmination of years of improvements on screen technology and the miniaturization of screen technology. It's a 4K 120Hz 17-inch display. Now, when you compare this to something like a desktop version screen with similar specifications, it has a lot higher pixel density, obviously because it's a lot smaller. This means in games like Metro and Doom, it gives a great sense of immersion, and the pixel quality is absolutely amazing. Onto the cooling design of the 77. Now, the GS series laptops has taken some inspiration from the GT series laptops that we reviewed a few weeks ago, but they have made some adaptations to be more of a stealthy design. On the rear, it has an extended rear just like the GT series, but whereas I found that to be extremely gawky on the GT77, the GS has made this smaller and also integrated things like the I/O on this, so it makes it a lot more of a stealthy, nice design compared to the GT77. As for the cooling design of this laptop, you do get a 2-fan setup, which is said to be 60% larger than previous iterations of the GS series laptops, and you do get a 6-pipe setup, which is honestly pretty common for these types of laptops. As for the exhaust points, you get 2 exhaust points at the rear where your I/Os are. You also get 2 exhausts at the side, and obviously a large intake at the bottom, which would be great if you're able to mount this on a laptop stand. As for the performance of the cooling setup, with the palm rest sitting at about 27 degrees under load and 26 degrees without load. That's pretty good, and you're not going to get toasty palms on this design. At the top of the chassis, you're sitting at about 40 degrees under load. In terms of noise, you are looking at about 50 dBAs under load and 40 dBA at idle. Now onto I/O. On the right side you get two Type-C and an SD card reader. On the left side you get two standard USB ports and a headphone jack, as well as a webcam lock. On the rear side you get an Ethernet port, a HDMI, and the charging port. Massive props to MSI again for doing a rear I/O. It gives you so much potential to tuck away cables and set this up just like a desktop at home. The speakers are another really awesome feature of the GS series laptop. The speakers come in with 6 individual speakers, 2 tweeters at the top, and 4 subwoofers that are mounted internally in the device, and they are 2-watt speakers, so they do push out quite a lot of noise, and you could use this as sort of like a standalone speaker if you wanted to, or just use it for immersion in gameplay. As for the keyboard and the trackpad, they're honestly pretty standard keyboard and trackpad, which is a collaboration with SteelSeries, so feel free to look at any of our other reviews to check out what we think about these. Now on to the most important section, the benchmarking section. We're going to do a direct comparison to the GT77 Titan, which we reviewed a few weeks ago. The Titan has the same specifications but has a higher TDP at 175 watts on the GPU and an Intel i9-12900HX. I will also use the 2022 Razer Blade 14 for reference, which has an AMD CPU and an RTX 3070. For Firestrike Ultra, the GS scored 7,114 and the GT scored 9,318. This is a big initial blow for the GS series laptop with a 27% fall compared to the GT, showing the first indication that the 70 watt power discrepancy between the two GPUs is going to be an issue. The Blade came in at 6,594, only showing a 7.5% improvement for the 3080 Ti over the 3070 Ti at low wattages for both of them. In Firestrike Standard, the GS scored 23,995, while the GT scored 28,615. That's a small difference of 18%, while the Blade scored 23,495, showing only a 2% difference between the two. This shows that the wattage of GPUs in laptops is equally as important as the number that precedes them, something to look out for if you're in the market for a gaming laptop. In the DirectX 12 benchmark time spy, the GS scored 10,704, while the GT had a marked improvement of 13,675, which was another huge 24% difference. The GS did, however, beat out the Razer by 10%, which marked the largest gain over the Green Team. Now, one of the additional tests we did run was the R23 Cinebench score. This was an awesome thing to do firsthand because it gave us a chance to try the slightly improved 12900HX in the GT series against the GS series baby brother, the 12900H. These are split only by a slightly higher core count on the 12900HX. In the Cinebench test, the multi-core test, the extra 4 threads of the GT series pushed it up to 23,039 against the GS's 18,079, which totaled a 24% difference. In the direct head-to-head single-core performance test, they both scored in at a 1,838, showing the difference is really only in those 4 extra cores. The Ryzen 6900H in the Razer did trail both of these with a score of 13,859 in the multi-threaded score. Now on to gameplay. In Doom Eternal, the GS77 averaged between 45 and 50 FPS running at 4K with no DLSS. With DLSS running, it hit between 50 and 55 FPS. This obviously comes nowhere near the 120 Hz of the screen, but it's pretty respectable numbers for 4K gameplay. Despite this, I wouldn't necessarily consider this an enjoyable gaming experience and probably would dial it back to 2K for the additional FPS. The Razer 14 2022 edition put up similar numbers for both the DLSS and non-DLSS tests respectively, but it runs at 2K, showing that under real gameplay conditions and at higher resolutions, that additional VRAM does make a bit of a difference. In Metro Exodus, we are looking at a performance between 20 and 25 FPS with no DLSS. This is essentially an unplayable experience and is more like a slideshow than a game. With DLSS, you are looking at between 45 and 50 FPS, showing a huge improvement, but still something I would consider that isn't enjoyable of a gaming experience. Finally, in Forza 5, the GS averaged between 35 and 40 FPS on 4K and 70 to 80 FPS at 1080p. Despite this low FPS score, it was a playable experience and was a great example of a game I would thoroughly enjoy on this machine. Even at 1K, the screen and speakers really come together into an immersive experience. It's really just hassle-free gameplay at its finest. If you're interested in us benchmarking any specific games in the future, let us know down below. Honestly, this review is pretty boring, and for good reason. The GS77 is a pretty boring laptop, but sometimes boring is all you need from a laptop. The GS77 does make some pretty good incremental improvements over the previous generations of GS series laptops. It does have a stunning display, and it does have specs that far go beyond its weight and its size. But none of these things are unique to the GS77, and you can find them all across the market from other producers or MSI themselves. Honestly, it feels like MSI is trying to squeeze the last bit of toothpaste out of the 3000 series GPUs and the 12th generation CPUs before they're superseded sometime this year. Despite this, normally when we review laptops like the GS77, we get a whole bunch of different laptops to compare to. In this instance, we got the GT77 Titan. Now, a benchmark I like to do in my own head is that if MSI was to forget they ever sent me one so that I could keep it, which one would I want to keep? And although the GT77 Titan absolutely runs circles around the GS77 Stealth, I would keep the GS77 Stealth hands down. I guess you could call this laptop practical, reliable, and I guess boring. It will get the job done, and it will get the job done in style, but with none of the flair that really justifies its price point. I guess that's why you can call it a stealth laptop. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video on the GS77 Stealth. Thanks to the team over at MSI, we are doing a giveaway of a gaming headset as well as a gaming mouse. So if you're interested in that giveaway, check out the links in the description below. It's completely free and easy to enter. And as always, if you like the content, feel free to give us a like and comment below what you thought about the GS77 Stealth. Thanks guys.